Hey everyone, welcome to AI Deep Hallucination. Today we're tackling a question that comes up in almost every LLM interview. Give a shallow answer and you're out. Explain dense and MoE, what's the difference?
I've been asked this twice. I answered, one uses everything, one uses a part, and the interviewer just said, and then? I was completely stuck.
Right, that's the classic trap. Uses everything and uses a part. Those are dictionary definitions, anyone can give them. The interviewer wants to hear 4 progressive layers.
Which layer counts as a passing answer?
Layer 2 passes, Layer 4 is offer level. We covered skeleton stays, parts all change in our transformer episode. Today we're cracking open the most critical part, how parameters are arranged. Layer 1, the essence of dense. Every token comes in, every parameter in the entire network participates in computation, head to tail.
All parameters spin up every time?
Yes, Llama 3.1 405B, this kind of dense flagship. For every token it generates, all 400 billion plus parameters are running.
400 billion plus that inference bill is scary. What about training?
Training is even scarier. Llama 3.1 405B burned over 30 million H100 GPU hours. 1 GPU hour means 1 H100 running for 1 hour. That's 21.6 gigawatt hours of electricity, nearly 9,000 tons of CO2.
Nearly 9,000 tons of CO2? Only big labs can afford that.
That's why MoE showed up. The internal processing network in each layer gets sliced into dozens or hundreds of small experts. When a token comes in, the router acts like a restaurant dispatcher routing orders to specific stations. Only a few experts work, the rest sleep.
So one token no longer uses all parameters?
Right? Look at this comparison. DeepSeek v3 has 671 billion total params but only activates 37 billion per token. 37 divided by 671 is about 5.5% of the compute, hitting roughly the same level as a same-size dense.
Training bill must be way worse than Llama 3.1405B, right?
11 times cheaper. DeepSeek v3 only used 2.8 million H800 GPU hours, costing about $5.5 million. Same quality tier, 1/11th the compute.
No wonder Meta switched Llama 4 to MoE.
From v3's release to Llama 4 going full MoE, only 4 months. That's the actual industry pivot speed. But hold on, Layer 2 is here. Is MoE just a suboptimal product after a trade-off?
Intuitively, yeah, density is discounted. Quality must be a bit weaker.
Half right, at equal total params, dense does win slightly. Even Switch Transformer, the foundational MoE paper, admits it. At equal per training loss, dense edges out by a few points on reasoning benchmarks like superglue. But there's a catch: equal total params plus enough compute to run dense. That assumption falls apart above 200 billion params.
Falls apart? How is the 200 billion threshold set?
It's a physical contradiction. Training a fully activated 671 billion dense by chinchilla scaling laws, that's DeepMind's paper. The params double, data must double 1. DeepMind is the Google subsidiary that made AlphaGo, the bill no one can pay. Llama 3.1405B's 30 million H100 GPU hours, doubling dense from there is basically undoable.
So, dense is stronger at equal conditions is a fake premise?
At any budget the industry can afford, MoE always wins. The strongest counter-evidence is Apple's paper from almost 2 years ago, published May 2024. They deliberately picked a setup unfavorable to MoE, equal wall clock budget, meaning actual runtime, not equal compute. The result: a 6.4 billion active MoE beat a 29.6 billion dense by 1.34 points on MMLU, the comprehensive subject benchmark, while running 3.55 times faster.
So, in one sentence, MoE isn't a forced suboptimal?
Right, the precise framing: MoE trades giving up density for scaling up total params, and the quality gain from scaling outweighs the density loss. So MoE isn't a suboptimal product. It pushes the quality cost frontier to a place dense physically can't reach.
Meaning dense can't catch up even if it tried?
Right, physically can't. Layer 3, architecture differences. This is the most interesting part. QN has 2 models with similar param counts, one dense, one MoE.
Different to what extent?
QN 2.532B is dense, 64 layers, hidden over 5,000, intermediate over 27,000. QN3's 30B, a 3B is MoE, 48 layers, hidden just over 2,000, intermediate around 700.
Dense full FFN is 36 times the single expert. How does that fit 30B params?
Because MoE spreads its parameter budget across the expert pool. Out of 30B total, 128 experts take more than 90%, leaving very little for the backbone. Dense is different. Every dense parameter must activate. To pack 32B, you have to push hidden up to over 5,000.
Why can't MoE just scale hidden up too? Active compute is small anyway.
Good question. 2 reasons. First, MoE's attention is still dense. Every token has to go through full attention computation, no expert split. So the larger hidden, the more attention eats activation budget. Second, during training, every token has to send its hidden dimension vector to experts on other GPUs. The larger hidden, the higher the communication cost.
Cross GPU, the experts aren't on the same card?
The most counterintuitive case is DeepSeek v3, a 671 billion flagship, with single expert intermediate of just over 2,000, more than 13 times smaller than QN 2.532B Dense's 27,000 plus.
So the intuition that big model equals big network, that's wrong.
Completely wrong for frontier MoE Layer 4, load balancing. This is MoE training's classic problem set. Routers play favorites early in training, popular experts overload, cold experts learn nothing. From 2020 to 2024, 4 generations of solutions evolved.
4 generations? Walk me through them from the start.
Gen 1 is G-Shard and Switch Transformer, both from Google's batch of foundational MoE papers. Add an auxiliary loss, stack a penalty on top of the main loss to force the router to distribute evenly. Coefficient 0.01.
Sounds like that penalty would fight with the main task.
Right? Drags quality down by 1 or 2 points. Gen 2, ST-MoE, Google's 2022 paper on stabilizing MoE training, added a new loss. They found router output values would explode like a speaker pushed past its power limit, clipping into distortion. Compress the value scale to keep training stable. Gen 3 is DeepSeek MoE, slice experts finer, add a shared expert. After fine-grained slicing, more experts are used per token, statistically harder to be extremely imbalanced, so it's indirectly mitigated.
How does Gen 4 solve the earlier penalty drags quality problem?
Gen 4 is DeepSeek v3's auxiliary loss-free approach. Add a bias scaler to each expert. This scaler doesn't go through gradient backprop, more like a thermostat. Overloaded ones get nudged down, underloaded ones get nudged up.
Wait, bias bypasses gradient? Isn't deep learning all about end-to-end loss backprop? This sidesteps that?
You got it. That's the most heretical part of this design. It admits some things are more efficient done by rules than learned by the model. Experiments show switching back to auxiliary loss consistently drops quality. This is the current go-to choice for mainstream flagships on the load balancing subproblem. Finally, the industry trend. Frontier 200 billion plus flagships are almost all MoE.
Any dense counterexamples?
At the flagship tier, basically none, but there's an interesting phenomenon, QN's dual track. Same team, flagships are MoE, smaller sizes are all dense. And in the QN3 generation, the smaller dense models from 0.6B up to 14B are all distilled from flagships. The teacher can be the 235B MoE or QN332B dense. QN332B itself is the teacher, not distilled.
So dense isn't dead? Just changed roles?
Exactly. One more recent counterexample. A few days ago, QN 3.627B, a dense model, beat its own house's 397B MoE on coding benchmarks.
A 27BD dense beating a 397B MoE.
One more counterintuitive point. For long context, 32B dense actually eats more memory than 30B MoE. Because KV cache, basically the model's context memo stored per token, scales with hidden dim and layer count. Dense side is over 5,000 times 64 layers, MoE is over 2,000 times 48 layers, several times difference.
Totally counterintuitive, so dense isn't fully superior either.
Right? So when the interviewer follows up, why is dense still alive? The correct answer isn't saves memory, it's that for small models, communication overhead eats the compute advantage, plus task-specific dense is more stable. Alright, today we covered 4 layers: compute economics, whether MoE is suboptimal, structural differences at similar param count, and 4 generations of load balancing. If there's an interview question you want us to break down, drop it in the comments. If this helped, hit subscribe and we'll see you next time.